Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this first session organized by the Vision Committee of the WTCB CSTC on digital transformation. My name is Tom Willemen, Chair of the Vision Committee and CEO of the Willemen Group. Function of the Vision Committee is to develop a middle and long-term vision for the construction industry. This year, there will be 3 sessions and accompanying studies organized. First of all, we have today's digital transformation by Alain Waha. Next up, we will have a session on circularity and changing business models by Thomas Rau. And finally, we will have a session on resilient buildings and city transformation by Alexander Dore. Each digital session is composed of 2 parts, with 1 week delay between them, a keynote presentation and a panel discussion with interaction of the public via the chat function and possibility afterwards to have discussions on the blog of our website. The goal is editing a vision on the topic. The vision paper will consist of 3 main parts. The vision of the keynote speaker after his study, the summary of the point discussed in the panel discussion and the blog discussion, and finally, a summary vision of the Vision Committee. So this is the first of the 3 main sessions on digital transformation by Alain Waha. You can ask questions anytime via the chat function on your screen, and the moderators will regroup the chat questions and ask them to Alain Waha. It's not a purpose to start discussions today, that's for next week, but rather discussions and questions about clarifications on the topics. And now I have the honor to introduce Alain Waha. Mr. Alain Waha is the co-founder of Cogital and leads Ventures and Digital Strategy Services. In his role, Alain works for Bureau Happold and institutionalizes BIM and to implement technology initiatives. He combines his activity with ventures incubation in PropTech and BuildTech. Alain is a regular invited speaker at digital transformation and industry events such as Build World, Build, Autodesk University. Alain also sits on a number of advisory boards, including HS2BIM Advisory Panel, Helix, 3D Repo and Synapse, and the Building Venture Investment Network. Alain joined the construction industry in 2008 after a career in aerospace and automotive. In the AEC sector, he has held roles as CEO of VC-backed venture Atlas Industry and Satelier Inc. His experience spans the AEC supply chain across Europe, US, and Asia. Alain, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. I would have made it shorter if I had realized that you were going to read it all. Actually, it misses the most important part. I am from Belgium, and the name of Waha is a rare but famous village in the Ardennes. So I'm absolutely excited to be speaking from London. I am assuming that the video is working and that I now can share my screen, and you will be able to, there you go. You will be able to see some images. So the topic, thank you very kindly for the invitation, is digital transformation. And I would like to spend a little bit of time, as little as possible, to share the understanding of digital transformation that I have gathered over the last few years, and then try to apply it together to the construction industry. But of course, what happens before financing and design and what happens after is equally important to all of us. So we know that this digital transformation started somewhat ominously with the word BIM, and we have been on a journey from the moment it was triggered with technology in 2005 and was hyped by many technology vendors, and we are seeing a gradual adoption what we aim to do today is leave BIM well behind and look at the future and 2030 horizons. And I rather like to try to kill the word BIM, because I think it's one of the barriers to actually putting the technology to work. For me, BIM is the digital medium of our industry. It is how we digitize the information and the data of our industry. And if we take that as a starting point, then we can start thinking about how do we use that information, that data? How do we innovate? How do we reshape the way we run the industry to transform it? I come at this with a very, very specific and personal viewpoint. So thank you for the invitation. But I think I'm only but one data point that I think is important you understand. My passion for technology comes from a passion for sailing and to put to work technology to get and win races. And so my first computer was a ZX80, and it was very underpowered 16K of RAM. I then, in the mid-80s, went to the UK because that's where the largest computer in university hands sat, at Manchester University, and you had to profess an interest in aerospace to actually get to play with it. So that's what I did. And I spent 5 happy years playing with a supercomputer at Manchester University that by now was probably much less powerful than my iPhone. And I translated that via a bit of time in Cambridge to applying technology in the automotive industry and changing business models. We saw the internet emerge in the late 90s. Running the internet on a WAP phone was no fun at all, but we could start to understand how we were going to use data to serve our customers. And to this day, the purpose and the interest of the automotive industry was to deliver mobility, and the winners are those that are using data to provide better mobility. And in 2008, I came to the built environment through an accident and discover what this industry does, which is to create spaces and amazing building. And the first building I worked on was the Abu Dhabi Louvre, and it was a fascinating adventure. So I find myself here with 3 hats. The hat of let's try to put technology to work through capital. So venture capital is extremely interested to see whether this is a new frontier for technology. The hat of digital transformation, having seen how it works out in other industry, can we make it work in our industry? And I am kindly invited, as you mentioned, on programs like HS2 or Deutsche Bahn and contractors like Romberg or Mace to try to think and reinvent their way of working. And then I like to actually get involved, and currently I lead the technology thinking, or certainly technology orchestration at Borough Happold Engineering, and involved with the Construction Innovation Hub in the UK, where we are running a program to try to transform the UK sector. More of that in a minute. And then in my spare time, I try to summarize, and this was a paper that we shared recently, simply because there were many questions flying around. What will the industry be post-COVID? And we had a point of view, and we put that together, and I invite everybody to have a look at it. The sentiment is industrialized construction is COVID ready, and let's not waste a good crisis. We're going to need investment in our industry to rebound. Let's make good use of it. So this technology question, I think it's very important that if we're going to look at 2030, which is only 10 years away, we need to really understand how to consider technology. And what we do know instinctively is that technology is having a deep impact in our lives, and that this chart is put in front of our eyes very, very regularly. around in 60 seconds. Look what happens through technology today. And of course, we don't call it technology. We call it Facebook, or we call it Amazon, or movie watching. And a couple of things that I think is worth noticing is that the speed at which technology is getting into our lives is really accelerating. So this chart shows that took 46 years for electricity to get into the houses in North America. 50% of houses got electricity within 46 years of its first introduction. It took 35 years to get the majority of houses in North America equipped with telephones, and then you can see television. It took 26 years. Mobile phone took 13 years. The web took 7 years. So when we are asking what will be transformational in 10 years, we have to be really mindful that it took only 7 years for the web to have a massive impact on society. So we have to be ready to reimagine the future in a way that's never been thought possible. I personally learned to speak English watching repeats of Star Trek on RTBF, and they had that machine that could access all the universe knowledge, translate on the fly, and answer questions on the fly. And here we are. We all have one. And the only thing that is really surprising is that we call it a phone, and we don't call it a computer or a tricorder. It is absolutely extraordinary, and it's worth pausing for a second to understand that we are living in this fourth industrial revolution, the 4.0, but at its heart is an exponential technology. And that's because Moore's law keeps on holding through, and Moore's law, as we know, predicts that every 18 months, the power of computers will double for the same price. And so we are not prepared for exponential technology. We certainly were unprepared to understand exponential virus propagation. And maybe it is easier. But of course, we know that if we as human double a distance, we know that 15 steps to the middle of the room is halfway down the room, and then another 15 steps, and I'm at the front of the room. But if I took 15 exponential steps, where would I be? And if I took 30 exponential steps, where would I be? And with all the engineers in the room, they're already begging me to ask, put the chart of the universe up so that we can give our answer. Because obviously, in 30 steps, you are at the moon. In 37 steps, you are at the sun. It is extraordinarily surprising. And so we as humans are planning, reacting in a linear way. And there is this exponential growth and surprise factor that is delivering very surprising outcomes. So much so that Sylvia Serres summarized this into 12 Gutenberg moments, all happening at the same time, all hitting and transforming society in the same way as Gutenberg created the Renaissance. And so, of course, asking the question, what will be construction in 10 years' time, is made somewhat more difficult by this exponential technology and so many things happening. So with that introduction, how to answer. And again, I bring back the question to what I understand. And having lived the digital transformation of automotive and mobility in the 2000s, I was working with universities trying to understand how do we make sense of it. And MIT created this framework, which I'd like to apply together to our industry. So the idea is that we will use technology maybe to digitize. You can then apply it to your business and optimize your business and leverage the technology to essentially do what you're doing now, but much more effectively. Or you can be a visionary and you can try to do completely new things, which we call incubate. But if you can get a business at scale to do these new things, then you get into the transform space. The market gets transformed, the business gets transformed. And just as by way of explaining, if we think about what happened in music and what we understood, we know that the music industry has digitally transformed. We know that it all started with Sony and Philips taking patents on the CD and making the music digital. They were selling us new hardware. That was their business model. They shouldn't have stayed there, of course, because as soon as that technology became commodity, we could standardize it. The MP3 player came along. The MP3 standard was published in the late 90s. And by 2001, Rio had created an MP3 player that did what a Discman did, but 1,000 songs in your pocket. And with that, Rio had 95% market share of the category, the MP3 player. Somebody else living in the future said, you don't want to even put it on a CD. Let's stream it. Let's stream it over the internet. Now you have to remember, it is 2001. In 2001, streaming over the internet, not everybody has a half a gig, let alone a 10 gig or 160 gig bandwidth at home. So his great idea is Napster. He's doing it. He's an insurgent. He's breaking the law. But more importantly, there is no market. Apple simplifies. Apple takes the Rio player and says, look, 1,000 songs in your pocket. Why call it an MP3 player? Connect it to your CD with the iTunes. Let's bypass the iTunes and create a market online. Gradually, people will get there and eventually turn on Apple Music and stream it. And eventually Spotify comes along and does it even better. So the market transformed in a period of 35 years, but the incumbent that had the market, the Fnac and the HMV, that ignored the CD, ignored that they had the relationship with the customer, abandoned and left their market to an incumbent. Well, not really. Apple had no plans to be in the music. It inherited the music industry by accident. And we know this because Apple had signed away the rights to be a music business because it had a brand conflict with the Beatles. The Beatles owned Apple Record, and they had reached an agreement with Apple that Apple would be a brand for computers and Apple would be a brand for music owned by the Beatles. And it was totally clear to everyone that Apple would never be in the music business. Fancy that. So with a bit more research, MIT came up with the fact that if you just digitize as a business, your shares, your margin, your customer market share will go down. As an incubator, you are investing heavily with risk against a market that doesn't exist yet. So it is margin destroying. If you try to put the technology to work in your business, you will thrive. And if you manage to accompany a market transformation, then the rewards are spectacular. I try to make that simpler for everybody to understand. Die happy is the fate of most innovators. Most startups don't make it. Die surely is those that ignore technology. Survive are those that put it to work on their business today. And those that thrive are those that can accompany, sometime by accident, the business transformation. And that sets up a really interesting conversation. The insurgents versus the incumbents. And the theme of today is, what does that look like in our industry? The insurgents, they're strong on innovation, they see the future, but they have no brand, they have no customer, they have to steal your customer, they have no real market understanding. The incumbents have strong brands, strong relationship, strong capital base, but they need to learn. They need to learn to innovate. What we see, software is eating the world. Either way, you have to learn how to use software technology. Amazon is an amazing retailer that uses software to sell. Second thing, data has become the world's most valuable resource. And there's something even more fundamental that's happening, is that somehow if you can get to the customer, there is a new business model in town, the business model of platform. And that is based on platformization, and it's a network orchestration. And one of the questions we need to start answering is, will that come to our industry too? And that will be obviously part of another workshop, but I'd like to lead into it. So the secret of the insurgent, to leave you with that concept, is that maybe it is that they are first with technology and cause an innovator's dilemma on the incumbent, or simply, and more likely, in my opinion, that the incumbent ignore technology too long. They have many reasons to decide slowly, worry about cannibalization, worry about investing into a new technology without a clear ROI, not having the right capabilities. So that in the end, it is the people's slow reaction. And we know from the Nokia board that they, by their estimate, missed the smartphone market by 1/4. It is a matter of 3 months that in an exponential technology, the market leader on mobile telephony was decimated. So now let's get to work. What does it look like for us? That's where I will try to go a bit quicker. So digitize, this is, I encourage everybody, you have to start there. So for example, Museum of the Future, we tried to deploy technology, we were building the future in Dubai to its max about 4 years ago. So of course it's all model-based, from the architect to the engineer to the contractor, everything is model-based. It's cloud-based because we are collaborating from Dubai to London to Bath to New York. It's live in the cloud. We are able to collaborate. We had a demanding client, His Majesty's Prime Minister of Dubai. So he had the iPad access. You link it to your full structural representation, full structural analysis. You put the full representation of all mechanical systems. And the ambition of, for example, the UK is to get to business as usual with BIM, i.e. getting all that to work by 2025. You will see that in the market. Argate is announcing there would be 100%. Arab talking about BIM maturity. Atkins talking about certification. This is another example of maturity measurement across BIM in a other contractor. And then you get to construction. And then once you're in construction, you put it to work for construction purpose. I think this is what you can do with the model. You can really rehearse and understand how the work is going to be taking place. In this case, actually it turned out that the site exiguity was the complex problem because it's literally under the Prime Minister's office and the set-down area is very limited. So figuring out the sequence in which we were bringing the secondary steel, BAM Group did a fantastic job in optimizing and understanding the flow of material, understanding the temporary work, and getting a much more effective program. And then they went and measured that it was happening indeed correctly. Here we were using laser scanner to measure what is at the site and recalibrate the models against the actual site so that it could be adjusted and ensure that the pieces that were coming to the site were still within tolerance. When temperature varies by 20 degrees and more, and you're building a steel structure, it gets challenging. And so, we will get to a generalized adoption and standardization of BIM against more than 20 use cases, typically in function of how you count them. You use the data in the models between 20 and 30 different model uses that you put to work. That's just digitized. As we know, the music didn't get better because it was put on a CD. So the question becomes, how do we actually build better? And for me, that is thinking about how do we put the technology to work to optimize what we do. And the fundamental thought is that how learning to work with a computer becomes the killing skill. The killer app of our century is working with computer. We know that a computer can now beat a human at chess, but the human and the computer together defeat the computer. And the best chess player with the best computer do not beat a human that understand how to use the computer. So there is a new type of digital expert that is better at getting advice and input from the computer than a normal chess player. So in terms of design, for example, we see the emergence of the concept of super users that bring together software engineering, computational thinking, BIM, into one person. And at Borough Happold, we very in pursuit of that ideal. We do not think that software is something that happens in the corner in a specialized group. So out of the 1,800 engineers so far, 800 have been trained. We've written about 500,000 lines of codes. And the use of BIM, the picture on the right, you can see Revit, but Revit being generatively manipulated by increasingly complex pieces of code. So that those coding skill and knowing how to mobilize software to deliver a better design is now a requirement for performance at every level, from the CEO to and of course or young engineers are the first one to adopt and want, being digital native, to do it that way. The result is spectacular. This is what happened inside Katera. They managed to automate away 70% of the effort of generating the information prior to getting to site. So that is what's at stake: the agility and the quality and the reduction in effort. Similarly, that mindset was put to work by the architects at WeWork that use data to automate the prediction of what should be the space layout in their offices. And they got 15% gain in the yield of the floor plates. So that the skill set that we see in these companies completely shifted from having about a quarter of people being expert, 5% being expert, to 25% becoming expert, and the novices being edged out. And of course, that for knowledge companies is a big challenge to understand. How do you bring people up the maturity curve very quickly, because you won't be able to recruit them and you need to provide everybody with a career. When the same thought is applied to the site, you want to start running your site as a factory. This is Maze Construction in the UK. And the idea is to say, okay, now let's use computer and the resolution that we have and the certainty we have to build that site as we would in a factory, with the help of technology, but with a completely new mindset. So delivery slot at that site were 6 minutes long. Every single part was measured And this allowed this allowed a repetition and an approach of a site being run like a factory, like clockwork, and literally reimagining the process of construction at site. And this was controlled by and is increasingly, the project is managed with this level of resolution and data by the combination of 3D imagery, connected workforce, a control room in the same way as you would have in a plant room, and understanding and access to all the data sets end to end in the company. So that is the vision of what I see today happening in terms of optimizing and mobilizing technology to optimize an existing business. Now, what I've just described in terms of music is the Rio MP3 player. Who is Napster? What do these guys look like? Who's going to be Spotify? Is it possible to disrupt the industry? What does the land of startup look like? And what can we learn from it? Because there was a lot to learn from Napster. So, yes, one first thing that we are seeing is encoding our knowledge. We know that our industry works in projects, but we want to get the knowledge from one project to persist and get to the next one. So here we have companies that are emerging, funded at the tune of $1 or $2 or $3 million, which are encoding knowledge. Alice is encoding the knowledge of what is the construction method, and once you have that knowledge and that language to describe it, you are able to predict and ask the computer to tell you how to build it, because you've put your knowledge of methods into the computer. And similarly, Hyper is encoding the knowledge of the architect, the engineers, and the planner in terms of how do I want to design it, so that the computer then applies those rules and makes the form emerge. You can then try to apply AI on this. This is adversarial AI. Adversarial AI that is working at creating the layout of mechanical ducting and piping for a contractor in California, on the basis that it's been done before. You just need to train your AI based on an input to get to an output that has happened before, and then give it a new input. Knowledge encoding comes in many forms. Here is a piece of work that's happening in Austria, where the idea is that most of our knowledge is in the head of experienced people, not software programmer. And these people are quite capable of going into a gaming environment. Why would they not use the gaming environment to say, well, the way I will build this tunnel is I will use this machine because that's worked in the past, and I will run it this way. So let them show you, using a computer gaming environment, how they will do that. At the back of that, you have the experience, you have the plan, and then you can let the computer try to do better. You could say, well, why did you not do it that way? Because that will fail, and then let the computer learn from that. So these are learning, these are coming. The next one, we also have all the learned knowledge of the planners and the rules. Which rule apply to that building? So can I have a language into which I can start expressing what do I want to see? What design rules do I want this asset to comply to? For example, do all the doors, emergency doors, open in the right way? Is the fire regulation compliance? Are all the access and egress routes the right size? If I can build a catalog of those rules, then I can check and get planning compliance. As soon as I've got all these tools in hand, then I can get to the next stage. I can start creating configurators that are both manufacturer aware, site aware, process aware, and rule aware. And I can start having at very high level, here is a site. What do you want to build on it based on what that site and what your process is capable of? And then let the computer generate that on the site, automatically calculate because it knows the process, it knows your cost base, it knows your supply chain, and let you interface and says, what would I build here? This is SimCity, but in real cities with real rule, with real planning rules, with real factories. The next thing that we're also seeing, which is really interesting, is reinventing the construction process. Number of people are looking at that. I used to think that this was not happening in the same way as when we started seeing drones enter our airspace. We thought this was a toy, and now they are in most sites. Here is 3D printing, in this case through a lost process and a lost molding process. But I've mentioned here Mighty Buildings in California that is doing it with really interesting new materials with 3D printing building. And then as soon as you're doing that, you have a full configuration, a full flexibility of what you could build, and you don't need to be constrained to the process, and you start iterating. So the conversation between the process and what is the product changes, which then brings up the question around, okay, I now need to link the design to the process. How do I do that? And we're seeing the emergence of tools where we can stream information in the same way as in every other industry. You can link your different systems across the internet. We've got a slightly more complex problem of streaming engineering data, cost data. Here is a company in the UK that is recently funded that already has 10,000 end nodes. So 10,000 people know how to connect their data and exchange data in near real time across their firms. The story goes on. And another very interesting one is supplier aggregation, simply because this is very close to the transaction, and if you can get and link your design to your supplier base and come back, repackage, and do an advanced work packaging iteration on what is going to be required, and if you on the top of that can change the design of, you end up in an iteration which looks increasingly like automated strategic procurement. That is, of course, the vision of Y2 Formative that was recently bought by Schneider Electric. So with a mindset of the venture capitalist, the question is always, what's the next wave? What is going to scale up? 10 years ago, the idea of an iPad in every site was crazy. As we know, Procore is now looking to float at circa 5 billion. And PlanGrid was bought by Autodesk for 800 million. So a lot of capital was put to work to create those companies and hopefully also to help the site. And now we see that on every site, we can connect, consume information, and hopefully operate more safely and more efficiently. So what is in the next wave of these iterations? How fast will the industry adopt these new technologies? That is in the mindset of the venture capitalists, back the ones that are the most valuable, but also make sure that the industry is learning to put technology to work. And so that's where corporate incubation becomes an interesting topic. Corporates are quite interested in making sure they don't get disrupted or want to understand what is now possible with technology. So by creating a bit of an incubator, you can get there. That can be your own, like Arcadis and McDonald's. You can buy one like JLL, or you can associate yourself. Brick and Mortar came out of going to get this wrong. DPR, but I think I'm getting this wrong. But Building Venture is got on its board of investor a number of very large contractors in North America. You don't need to go the VC route. You can set up an open innovation ecosystem around your firm through your associations. The objective being, where there is an exciting technology that could be put to work to help you get moving faster, let's do that. Which leads us to, okay, we know what the insurgents are doing. We know what all the incumbents should be doing, but what will market transformation really look like? Because I've so far talked about Star Wars. I've talked about a digitized process, which looked very much like the old process. So I'd like to spend the last few minutes to cover what that might look like, taking note from how the other industries evolved. And I think there are a couple of things that we have to put forward. The first one is the purpose of our industry, because it's by serving the purpose that we get to actually restructure and transform an industry. If the purpose of your industry is to move, then making cars that are parked is highly inefficient. It is not logical for us to have an industry that makes cars and leave them to slowly rust. 94% of cars at any time are parked. So just leaving that thought, that is what creates the value of an Ola or a Didi Catching or even an Uber. Industrialization must be a new frontier for us. We can't get there without a transformation. There is a market failure. There is a chicken and egg. I cannot optimize a process against a market that doesn't exist. And then there is this platformization that leads to new business models. And so I'll spend a minute on platformization. So look, we want to build better. Can we be super efficient? This is not new. This is Martin Fisher in 1995. Every worker builds the right product safely, sustainably, and productively. Build better buildings, I think, is a really interesting challenge. Today, are we achieving to build better buildings, or are we always value engineering out what would have made it a better buildings? I think we need industrialization to get to better buildings. And this is not new. 1930, Mies van der Rohe already said, we need to carry out industrialization. But did we have the technology to handle the complexity of our industry? I don't think so. Did we have the technology to handle the customization that we need for our industry? I don't think so. And eventually, let's not forget, and I think this is going to be quite formatting, that we do not build things, we create spaces for our societies. Our purpose is to create a living space, a working space, a mobility space. The thing is not the thing unless it's a sculpture. And even then, it's an emotion. So, with that introduction, switch to an industrial mindset, first and foremost, means we think in terms of products, we think in terms of brand, we think in terms of product lifecycle management, we think in terms of specialization. Our industry is vast. Our industry can be industrialized, but I don't make a plane the same way as I make a train. And the mobility industry is a small size compared to the total built world. So we're going to need to specialize. Those that specialize and make great homes, if they're thinking product, if they can get value from brand, then they could invent a new normal. Yes, it will have a factory. You will economically be able to iterate, learn from the product and put it in version 2 and then put it in version 3. And you will industrialize and you will use technology. to make the mass customization through your process. But what you will standardize is the process ahead of standardizing the product. To get there, what we do know is that there is a market failure. Industrialization does not happen, although it's highly efficient, if there is no supply side in front of a demand side. And so certainly the economists are telling us that we need a number of policy intervention to make the industrialization work. And that was the work of the economist in the UK, that same economist that came to the realization that it needed a policy intervention to lead to BIM adoption. And so they're putting their money where their mouth is, and they created the Construction Innovation Hub with the specific intent to match a demand side that they have created from the government demands in terms of needs for schools, needs for housing, need for transport hubs, and a supply side saying to the manufacturing expert, please go and talk to our building experts and our digital experts and make it work against this demand. And they are investing and helping the industry make that journey. So there is a specific market intervention on the supply side that we believe is required. The key to unlock it, you will have seen platform design. Platform design means to try to decouple the thing from the space that we are trying to deliver. And one way to do that in the products that the client wants to buy is to think about it in terms of systems. So an educational system is made up of assets such as schools. Those assets are made out of circulation spaces, teaching spaces, technical spaces, meeting spaces, toilet spaces, kitchen spaces, and those spaces repeat. They repeat in social housing, they repeat in other domains, and what makes up those spaces is also repeating. And it's repeating at a systems level, the need to provide lighting system, the need to provide ventilation systems. So we are bringing together the idea that the systems is the way to integrate through assemblies, not the trades. So we create a systems interface that allows us to scale by creating systems provider that integrate into what is called a chassis or a platform design. What is fascinating is to look after that once you industrialize in that way, then you will have the smiling curve effect, is that the industrial asset become less value adding, and the design and interface and the understanding of the customer and the R&D and the ongoing service around that asset becomes much more valuable. This so-called smiling curve that was observed in industrialization and in early electronics. So translating what that will means that actually the system thinking requires the system designer and the system operator to be one and the same, so that you may be, that's a business model choice, selling ventilation instead of selling a ventilation system, or simply the metal that makes the ventilation system itself. So that will lead to a number of integration and re-intermediation of our value chain. We are looking at what are the different scenarios that happen sector by sector. The housing sector and the size of it in geography will respond differently from a more controlled sector like housing, like schooling and education. The same way as the demand and supply of nurses is mostly controlled by a government's health policy, we expect the same thing will happen with space. And so this scenario modeling then really gets underpinned by the idea that there is a decoupling of the creating of what I want and specifying it and then building it. And so this is underpinned by a digital configurator with different decoupling point, and quite a lot of research is going at establishing what each of those looks like and what they enable. What is fascinating, this is latest research from McKinsey. Unfortunately, I can see the source has disappeared, but McKinsey, the new normal, proposes that this reintermediation will see a redistribution of value across all value chain by as much as 45%. So if that is correct, that is very, very significant. It's a reindustrialization leading to a merger and acquisition and redistribution of value on our value chain by 45%. And of course, to make that happen, you need technology, and you will create those digital internal platform and these digital external exchange platform. This is what will drive the creation of the digital platforms. Now, will an ubiquitous AC platform arise? Is it likely? Is it desirable? That becomes the next question. So the Encore Foresight report was quite interesting to see that not everybody agreed. There seemed to be more certainty that it was going to happen, but not so much certainty that it was relevant. I will make the case that it is highly relevant. I will make the case that it is transformational. We have seen it ourselves. The first platform was invented by a European. The first platform was invented by Tim Berners-Lee at CERN. This is his original paper and application for funding and the comment from his supervisor. Semantic linking of information. Vague, but exciting. This was the actual word on Tim Berners-Lee application for the creation of the first platform. The second platform came in 2004 and was the social platform. And the patent taken by Facebook is on the right. It is all gain. It is just the semantic linking of people. It is exciting, but very addictive. We have learned a lot. I would make the case, as Elon Musk made, as War Magazine made, that there is the digital mirror. The third platform is an ubiquitous digital mirror of the built environment. And that this third platform is what we are talking about. And it is very exciting. It is very exciting because if it is ubiquitous, we will be able to reconnect the space, the people, and those that are creating it. In the same way as we completely reconnected the people that consume and enjoy music with the artist. We removed the A&R industry. We removed the vinyl industry. We removed the distribution and those shops. We created a new authentic relationship between those of us that want to listen and consume and enjoy and be fan of music and those that are the artists that are creating it. The same thing will happen with space and the built environment. And whereas in the 30s, when we did the third industrialized revolution and we had Bauhaus telling us forms follows function, I believe that we will see forms follows data. And it's going to be absolutely fantastic to really think through how does the space work for us? Not the thing, the space. How does the thing create the space that we really enjoy and try to capture and understand how we generate delight? Because generating delight, inspiration, emotion, living space, happy family spaces is what we are about, but what we cannot do today. The second thing is we know that these platforms enable completely new business models. And more of that in the next session. But just from my perspective, when you see Hyper connecting a community around the world of people that are encoding their architectural knowledge and saying, I want my knowledge to interface and interact with your knowledge and co-create the space that we need. That is very interesting. That is very profound way of thinking about architecture. I am not letting an architect translate his understanding into a drawing. I'm asking the architect to say, this is how you solve the problem, solve it, see what it does, and then come back to that form that your thought has been put into the platform. We will see products emerge. The space becomes a product. This is a real graph of a real estate company that is interested in the living product. They think about whole life across living in space and how they're positioning brands and how they are managing and buying and creating spaces across those categories and which categories are working for them, because targeting those brands to those categories across those lifestyles is how you extract value. Ultimately, if you are somebody to build a car and you don't know who's that somebody and anyway has no choice, you build a ladder. I guarantee you, if you industrialize the car industry and you do not give the market a choice, you build a ladder. It's only when you get the market feedback and you try to delight your customer that you start saying, well, what does the customer want? Where is he in his space? What will they value, and therefore what can I sell? Once we have that conversation going, we are in a product conversation. As soon as we have a product, it can be difficult to sell as a product. I may want to sell it as a service. And we've seen that category emerge very rapidly. Current JLL forecast is that 30% of commercial real estate space will be servitized. So we are seeing a complete dematerialization of space. And the industrialized construction firm will sell space as a service in the same way as we at Michelin in 1998 realized that the customer was not trying to buy a tire. The customer wanted to safely travel to its destination. And if I am a bus company, just charge me for a mile. I'll be very happy, make everything else happen. I don't want to buy a tire. I don't want to account tire. I don't want to run it. I just want to move. That business for Michelin is multi-billion today, because the technology in the late 90s suddenly allowed us to get at the data, get at the customer, and automate it away. We were better placed to provide mobility to about 30% of the market. That is about the size of the market. Any market where servitization takes hold, about 30%. Then we get to this world of digital twins. And I really want to put forward the work done in the UK and the work done with the Open Data Institute and the GDPR thinking that goes in it. Because as soon as we create a third platform, we are in real dangerous territory. So the principles that have been published for the Gemini principle is to understand that actually the digital twin and the digital mirror will create an immense amount of value and information that could be for the public good. In the same way as I want to know what is the level of immunization in the population so that I feel safe, I need to have that contract with society that people give away their data so that the total society is safer. Now that conversation, when it comes to the last place on earth where we can escape digital, i.e. the built environment, that conversation becomes quite poignant. So we wrote some principles. Where tech vendor, the built environment, is about creating a digital infrastructure and a digital mirror that pervasively knows what's going on. And then you can benevolently want to make that work for you. And you say, what happens when these technology giants that have a business case for getting to that data and make the built environment better help us? Well, you have Toronto Sidewalk Labs. This is a multi-step journey that Google has done with their first platform, Flux, the Flux Factory, that was a set of tools, the Sidewalk Labs, and their generative design and their R&D labs. But let's not forget that in the end, there is a surveillance capitalist question. Do you trust Google in your city? And in this case, the residents of Toronto decided no. And the project is coming to an end. I think we are missing a massive opportunity, but I think we are also right to ask the question in our society, do we want to be recognized? Do we want the system to respond to a level of knowledge of what we are thinking, what we are doing, such that other decision can be inferred? So good data for the public good becomes a really, really interesting debate. So that digital mirror, I think, will be the battlefield for the insurgent versus the incumbent. It looks very simple when you draw it like that. The platform emerged to help the asset talk to each other, horizontal integration of the value chain, vertical integration of the value chain, all becomes very easy. It ain't. What we know is that our industry has information and business patterns that are unlike any other. We are much more complex. Of course, we're much bigger. We are geographically dispersed. We have a vernacular. We have a long history. We've been doing this for thousands of years. So making a platform that works in our industry, we can see the potential, but how do we get there? Back to my digital transformation and technology angle on this. So Singapore understands the transformation and is heavily funding a number of platform and initiatives to try to make data flows across Singapore under the GovTech initiative. And they understand and they're very focused on that transformed business model. Here in Europe, we are very cognizant of that same fact. And we see that the DigiPlace initiative is fully funded and can be transformational in terms of process and business model for our sector. And we know that at the core of it is the reference architecture. What powers the internet is HTML. What powers the businesses on the internet is API Web 2.0 technologies. So if you go look in the US, Katera has already de-merged its platform. And it's called Apollo, and it's meant as an operating system for construction. They manage 5 data streams across the full value chain. They allow you to connect. It runs in Amazon Web Services. It's about exchanging cost, schedule, material location, activities, manpower, and performance. That is what their iOS system is built to do. It's, of course, a closed garden. It's a proprietary platform. It is built like AOL and MSN were built by the Americans in the beginning. What we can be very proud of is that we built the web on top of TCP/IP. We built the web on top of HTML. Those core, very simple and quite geeky piece of technology that nobody needs to know about, that actually power the diversity of the first and the second platform. All we need to do is to create those missing standards that allow information to pass in our industry. For construction and design, that's been a bit of a passion of mine to try to make that happen or certainly contribute to it. So we have a project running in the UK now for about 18 months that is trying to create a reference architecture of how that could work and see what happens when it is. We've assembled a team. We're coming to the end. The reference architecture was built by a number of firms in an open sourced way. engaging a number of partners, inviting anybody to come, and it's published. It's open sourced in the same way as all the other standards should be. So would that lead us to a Web 2.0 moment where suddenly across the internet we can reinvent the structure of our industry? Maybe, or maybe not yet fit for purpose. So what we do know is that in combination, platforms will transform the construction ecosystem. This is the business model and the view of Singapore IDD. They estimated that at trade level, we could go as far as eliminating 70% of labor at the site. Of course, that is a Singapore view. That's a Singapore objective. Japan has the same. Aging workforce drives you towards making that use of the platform. We're looking at business models. Certainly one emergent one that we can see is to rethink across a digital platform, what are the real role of creating funds, understanding what are the needs, then creating a product, making and assembling the product, getting it at site, and then operating it. That whole value chain of our industry will be supported by a digital platform or a AEC internet of sorts. And at the heart of it, if we have industrialized, then we have a completely new type of company. Let's call it an assembler, like the car assembler. Whether they have a brand or whether the brand owner doesn't assemble, like Apple, who knows? But there is this new type of company that is likely to emerge. And you will have read the latest McKinsey report, which predicts that by 2035, 15% of real estate will be built by such assembler. So, as always, digital transformation, it took 35 years in the music industry. This is 15 years out, 15% market share of an immense market. I think that's a bold prediction by McKinsey. So here we go. We're back at the beginning. Insurgent, incubating new ideas. Incumbents, optimizing their business and trying to transform and get ready. Mark Anderson in 2011 talked about that battle already. The battle of what was happening in the platform world, creative destruction, the battle between the incumbents and the insurgent. We can go to other industries and understand how it played out, what were the successes. I personally observed that it's only a matter of doing two things. One, remembering that things have changed. It's about data, it's digital transformation, it's an exponential technology. We are gifted as a generation. We are gifted the opportunity to change the built environment. It is this generation and those that follow in our firms that they will put to work that technology to build a better environment. We need to make sure, and that is the main recommendation, get up that digital maturity curve quickly and get agile. It's unpredictable world out there when it's exponential. You just don't know what's going to work. And with that digital transformation, it's not a project in the company. It's simply a culture. It's a mindset of saying, let's put technology, exponential technology to work to do what we want to do and pursue our purpose better.
Thank you very much, Alain. It was a pleasure listening to you. It started very hands-on and it evolved to the view on the future. I'm very much looking forward to next week when we can ask questions and can go in debate with you and the other selected panelists. So I would like to invite everyone to join us again next week, same day, but 1 hour earlier at 4 o'clock, to start the debate, to ask questions. You will receive an invitation from us to join us and to subscribe. I would also like to thank the chair and the co-chair of this session, Kevin Detier and Chris van der Voorde, and of course the whole WTCB CSTC team for making this all possible. And Alain, I'm looking forward to see you in person next week at the debate. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you very much, Tom. I just wanted to say there were no real questions for the moment. I think it's a huge amount of information that was given. So I can maybe close it down here, because now we are 1 hour and 10 minutes and we try to restrict it to about 1 hour. So if you have more questions, please don't hesitate. Ask them on our vision blog. So you saw that on the site. We have a vision blog in which you can start discussions. Just go to the site, which is called Visi.WTCB, or for French-speaking persons, it's vision.cstc/blog. En principe, you're going to still see the PowerPoint show. I can ask Peter to show that again, so that you can find and click on the site and discover that website. So thank you very much, Alain, for this, and I hope to see you all also again next week. Thank you very much, Tom, for presiding this session.
You're welcome.